Good evening, everyone. If you want to just bear with us for a few moments, as you can quite well see, there are a lot of you joining us this evening for what is a very significant and hot topic, to say the least. But there are a few more still coming into the waiting room. So if you bear with us just another minute or so, and then we will begin. Okay, I think with so many of you already waiting, we will actually now begin. So let me begin again by saying good evening. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Forgive me for 1 second. I want to ask you all, before we actually begin, to ensure that you put everything on speaker, just to put your settings on actual speaker mode, so you can actually see and highlight whoever's speaking at the time. Now, I had been thinking for some time on wanting to do something on mental health, but it, to the credit, takes an organization like JAMI to galvanize somebody, because by virtue of their special annual mental health Shabbat, which takes place this weekend, it encouraged me to put my thinking cap on and come up with something creative in this week. Of course, because we're not in Shul on Shabbat to talk about it, at least we could do something, in fact, more productive and more interactive now here during the course of this week. And I did the most obvious thing. First, I reached out to the chair of JAMI, Adam Dawson. It helps that he's a member of Mill Hill Shul, and I've known him on a personal level and worked with him as he pretty much single-handedly built the Eitz Chaim School of Mill Hill. He's also a very successful barrister dealing with personal injury and clinical negligence, and he's widely regarded in his field. And I would actually want to add a personal note over here. He had actually been struggling with COVID over the last several weeks pretty badly, even for a very fit guy. So thank God he's doing so much better. And we're delighted that he's able to join with us. JAMI is the Jewish community's mental health charity, and it is hosting its online dinner this year. It's doing so online, in fact, this Thursday. So I am especially grateful to you, Adam, that you made the time to be able to be with us here this evening. Next, I needed someone who is an expert in mental health and who better than a leading psychiatrist. So it also helped that Dr. Jonathan Ornstein is a member of the Mill Hill Shul. And maybe when I use the term leading psychiatrist, I'm underselling him, because he's actually a consultant with Camden and Islington NHS Mental Health Foundation Trust. He runs a private practice in Harley Street at Nightingale Hospital and at Chase Lodge Hospital. So again, taking time out to join with us this evening is especially appreciated. And again, we are extremely grateful to you, Jonathan. Now, Cheryl Friedman and I starred in a video last year for the JAMI dinner. I got to interview her on some of her personal experiences. Cheryl, again, a Mill Hill member and indeed a near neighbor, is also deputy head of the Sharon kindergarten in Finchley. And more than anything, Cheryl has made quite an impact by bravely sharing her own experiences and her struggles on a number of different forums, as she did in that particular interview that I did with her for the whole JAMI dinner. And she's going to do so again with us this evening. But I would add, recently compounded by some of her own recent life events, as we will hear this evening. Cheryl, again, I'm so grateful that you were willing to join and to share with us tonight. So let's begin. Adam, if I can start with you. Here we are, 11 months into this pandemic, third lockdown. I mean, it's crazy even when you say the words 11 months on. There's no way anyone, I believe, is emerging unscathed by this. And while some of us might handle things better or figure out how to cope a little bit more on our own, many, far too many, are not. So I'm going to ask you in the first place, can you share if you've seen an uptick in demand for JAMI's services, and indeed, how do you cope when most of it now, I would have to assume, has to be dealt with online, has to be dealt with virtually?
Thank you. Before doing so, Rabbi, thank you for inviting me to join here, but also thank you for prioritizing and for arranging this event. And it struck me, I wonder how many years ago we'd have to go back where the concept of having 100 people getting together to talk about mental health and mental well-being would really take place in the community. And you do a tremendous amount in Mill Hill and in the wider community, supporting JAMI, supporting mental well-being. So thank you for putting together tonight, and I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you also for describing me as somebody who was relatively fit prior to COVID. So it's nice.
Only because I always see you running on the streets.
You do indeed. Please God, I'll be back to doing that in the next few weeks. You're absolutely right. In terms of mental health, I don't think anybody is going to emerge unscathed. And I think really what we've seen is two aspects to this. The first is the individual mental health. And I think that we see far more people struggling. Lockdown is something which is completely alien to any of us. It's not something which most of us in our lifetime have ever experienced. It's led to uncertainty. The social restrictions have led to an isolation. And it's led to all of us having to change and adjust the way that we live and the way that we operate. And of course, when it first started, we were first of all told, well, it may last for a few weeks. And then after a few weeks, it became a few months. And as you say, here we are, 3 lockdowns in, 11 months down the line. Hopefully there is an end in sight, but certainly that end is not just around the corner. In terms of the second aspect, I think that for the first time, what we've seen from the leadership of the community, and putting politics aside, it's incredible to see that the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State for Health, when talking in the very early days about the pandemic, gave mental health and mental well-being that parity of esteem, recognized the fact that actually it wasn't just the physical health of the nation that was going to suffer, but the mental health. And I think that is something, certainly we didn't see it when 2009 with SARS. The community, the country has faced other attacks upon it. And we haven't seen that same emphasis, that same concentration to say mental health matters. So to answer your question directly in terms of JAMI, what do we do? We have, and I take very little responsibility because we have a fantastic professional team. And instantly, as soon as lockdown was announced, we completely pivoted the way that we provided services. We had to, unfortunately, because of the restrictions, shut down our hubs and our cafe in Golders Green, but we turned that into a positive. We turned the cafe into a hub for cooking. We provided hundreds of hot meals, which, you're right, we were able to communicate just via Zoom and other video platforms. But we also took the opportunity to be able to deliver food so that we could have doorstep chats and be able to relate and talk one by one. What our professional team did is identify who the most vulnerable people were. JAMI in any time can probably deal with in the region of 1,300 or 1,400 people. But of those, around 200 or 300 are the more vulnerable. And we identified who they were. We provided hardware in terms of laptops and computers so that we could continue that one-to-one involvement interaction. And as I say, we provided a face-to-face doorstep service. In terms of the numbers, yes, it's boring to, I know, to talk about statistics, but our referrals went up 110%. Our young people and carers referrals went up 170%. And all of this happened within a very short period of time. I think the other thing to say in terms of the way that we're looking at our services is that we've got to now look at what is the longer term picture, because whilst hopefully the physical elements of the pandemic, the illness and forbid the tragedy of the deaths and the death numbers will over the next few months, and as the vaccinations go up, hopefully slow down and hopefully people will start recovering. In terms of the tail that's left, that's likely to be the mental health. That's the people who've been affected by it, That's the people who've been affected directly in terms of their mental health through isolation, but also in those indirect ways through the way that the economy is going, through people losing their jobs, so people finding themselves just in very different situations from where they were before. So at the moment, having done what I would say that kind of emergency frontline reaction to try and deal with what this pandemic meant for the community's mental health, now what we're concentrating and looking on is where do we go from here, and how can we be there to make sure that as we come out of lockdown, as we come out of this pandemic, that we can try and come out, first of all, together with those who've been suffering with their mental health, but also try and promote and encourage and really ensure that we are able to support those in our community who need it.
Wow, thank you so much for that insight. The percentage increases that you reflect on, whatever was 110% and then 170%, that's incredible. That's huge, and it just goes to the core of reflecting how much people have been impacted, which brings me straight on to you, Jonathan, Dr. Ornstein. You're literally on the front line. So dare I ask, I mean, if you can give us maybe some firsthand insight into the very real way in which you are seeing people being impacted. I mean, there's a lot of talk about drug and alcohol dependency going up. There's increased cases of overdose, and even outside that realm, just generally, can you share what you know to be the consequences of this pandemic, whether through lockdown or whatever else, on people's general well-being?
Certainly. Well, thank you, Rabbi. And certainly I'd like to echo Adam's thoughts on thank you for bringing this together. The first thing I'd say is there is somewhat a false divide between health and mental health. You know, health is how you are. And so we think of it physically and what we're going through, what we feel physically, you know, when we feel unwell. But somehow we feel when our brains and our emotions aren't working as they normally do, or they're causing us pain, somehow that's a different form of health. But it really isn't. And so when you're looking at what's happened with the pandemic, the normality of where we exist has changed. So first of all, there's been huge death rates and premature deaths. And we saw it very markedly in the Jewish community, certainly at the beginning. And what do we do in Judaism? We have very set rituals and practices to help bring comfort and to get us through these periods. And of course, they got blown out the water. So, you know, attending funerals and shivers became a very different experience. You know, the joyful experience has changed as well. You know, the changes in bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and weddings, and just going to shul and the main festivals. So straight away, the atmosphere in which we live got changed hugely. So people lose their bearings. People lose some of the comforts in their roles and their rituals and their day-to-day practices. We see it within our community, but that's true, I think, of all communities. So straight away, people felt lost, and you saw anxiety rise very clearly and very markedly. There was a time when it was strangely almost exciting, and people felt we were in this together. And, you know, to think of the sort of, I think of the First World War, this idea, well, it'll be over by Christmas. You know, it'll be over soon, this idea that, well, it's okay, we'll put our heads down and we'll get on and we'll be okay because, yeah, this will just wash over like things normally do. But that slow realization that it wasn't washing over quickly, that things had changed, that the things we can normally do to manage our own anxieties and to manage our enjoyment, you know, the things we like to do, were completely changed. And so putting our head down and just waiting for it to end wasn't going to work. But I think people in general, myself included, are slow to do that. We're creatures of habit. So you saw anxiety rise. You saw anxiety rise because suddenly there was a very big, real thing to be worried about. You saw anxiety rise because we lost the things we normally do to manage our anxiety. So it's a sort of double whammy. We saw anxiety rise because it's suddenly harder to get help. You know, if normally you would go to your GP if you were feeling unwell, you maybe became scared of going to your GP and seeking that kind of help. And it was harder to get help because even right now, my NHS team is absolutely decimated by COVID. One of the teams that I share a building with has had to shut down because all but one person has COVID at the moment. So suddenly you see healthcare professionals and other health professionals in general scared. I know doctors having to go into wards that they've not worked in for years because they were short-staffed and being really scared, and the same with nurses. So if this was sort of societal anxiety pre-COVID, this is now. So everyone's anxiety level goes up. And I was seeing people how am I going to get through this without seeing my grandchildren or my children? Or how am I going to get through this without seeing my parents? Or how am I going to go and visit my elderly relatives? And not only how am I going to see them, how are they going to survive? And I saw people going through terrible, terrible bereavements where they weren't able to go to visit their relatives in hospital. And the same with funerals and shivers. And, you know, this is both professionally and also personally. So it really has touched everyone, I think, in all sorts of ways. So it's harder to get therapy. So we know that antidepressant prescriptions have gone right up. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. These are useful and easy treatments, but they're not suitable for everyone. And, you know, they're best with therapy as well. So you're losing an arm of treatment, really. The patients already had with pre-existing mental health illnesses. I'm seeing more. I'm getting more emergency phone calls and emails and texts from people at all sorts of hours and trying to manage that. I'm seeing a lot more new patients. Interestingly, in my NHS work, I work predominantly with people with psychosis, and actually things haven't changed quite so much there. But in the realms of depression and anxiety, the numbers have gone sky high. And as Adam says, you know, we're going to see the sort of secondary and tertiary damage coming up as time goes on, I think, with economic issues and changes in family and sort of a post-COVID change in things. But also, you know, this is a harder time as well. In the summer, at least you could go outside very easily and drink a glass of rosé, and it's in the winter. So, you know, quite aside from having to change to a more robust red than a rosé, you know, we've got to really change all the things we're trying to do. But if you want, and I'm sure for another question, we could come up with, you know, how do we manage these changes and what are the things we should really try and be doing?
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. I couldn't help but notice in the far corner there were what seems to be a bottle of wine as well. Is that a rosé? I appreciate the insight, and actually just mind-boggling in a sense, but not surprising to appreciate how the lockdowns per se and the whole pandemic, yes, coupled with the bereavements, as you highlight, have just impacted so many more people in so many different ways. And you wonder, when will we finally see our way out of this? And that, speaking of bereavements, takes me on to Cheryl. Now, Cheryl, you've spoken openly before about your own struggles with mental health. During this pandemic, as Jonathan just highlighted, people have endured loss and been unable to grieve properly. Some have been dealing with illness in their family and endured so much anxiety over whether their loved one can get access to the appropriate or best help. In your case, you've experienced both. Apart from what you often talk about in terms of how you managed your struggles in the past, your wonderful husband, Ian, was diagnosed with cancer sometime just before the pandemic. And at some point during this pandemic, in September, just a few months ago, you lost your dad. I've got to ask you, Cheryl, you are the perfect case study here for Jonathan and Adam. I mean, how do you cope?
Good question. Thank you, Rabbi, for allowing me to talk about this very important topic. Good question, though, about how do you cope. I think everybody's different. As you rightly said, everything in my life was going relatively well before December 19, when unfortunately Ian got diagnosed with cancer. In a way, we were lucky that lucky in a strange way. We were lucky that he got diagnosed before the pandemic, as he was able to access his treatment before the pandemic started. He actually had his first chemo on February the 14th of last year. So in that respect, we were quite lucky, and his treatment wasn't held up by any problems. And then, of course, I lost my father, which was incredibly hard because he was in hospital for a very, very long time. We were, again, in a weird kind of way, very lucky that because he was what they termed as end of life, we were able to visit him on a daily basis, which was good in a way, but incredibly difficult, as you can imagine. And then eventually when we lost him, you know, as you know, because you led the service, that we only had a few people at the shiver. I think with my experience in mental health, and I'm no way any expert or any professional, I always draw from my own experiences. I think, as I said, everybody deals with it differently. And if you were probably to ask me, you know, December of 19, before the day that Ian got diagnosed, or before the day that Ian got diagnosed, how are you going to cope? I'll tell you hands down, when they told Ian that he had cancer, I was the one that fell apart, and Ian was trying to console me. So I knew from that day that I said to Ian, there's no way that I can deal with this. This is going to have a terrible effect on my mental health. But for some weird reason, and some reason that I'm grateful for, I've learned to find, I've pulled out this inner strength in me that I can 98% of the time try and find, you know, a bit of strength that gets me through. The pandemic has been incredibly hard for us as a family, and also for my family outside of my immediate family, my sister. I haven't seen my brother, that kind of thing, but that's for everybody. Everybody has dealt with that as well. The way that I try and get through these difficult times is to, as Jonathan said, you know, routines. Routines is a massive thing for somebody that suffers with ill mental health, because you have to have that routine in your life to get you through. So when I was at my darkest time, and when I was quite ill mentally in 2010, 11, the only way that I could get through a day was to try and section my day into morning, afternoon, or even smaller sections, maybe an hour in the morning. And I tried to try and find things that I would accomplish that day. It could be the smallest things. It could have been putting the washing on, for instance. And if I knew that I could accomplish that, I knew that I'd accomplished something. So it's very important for me. And as I said, I'm no expert, and I only do what's right for me, is to try and find something that gets me through the day. And I deal with that day, and then I go into the next one. Everybody has bad days, not, you know, people have up days, people have down days. And like Jonathan said, antidepressants do help. And I myself have been on antidepressants for many years. And I certainly don't think I could have got through some of the most difficult times of my life without them. Because I think, and I'm no medical expert, but it's an imbalance in your brain when you have depression and anxiety, and it sort of flicks the switch the right way. For me, it's worked, and it's been wonderful. So, as I said, it's different for everybody. I try and get through with a bit of a smile on my face if I can. Other days I, you know, try hard to get out of bed and try and put my smiley face on if I can. But it's incredibly difficult, and I feel for people that are really having difficulty getting through. I think the most important thing is, if you can, I urge you to talk to people, to talk to your boss, or to talk to your sister or brother or family, or anybody that you feel that you can relate to, and they might listen to you. It's incredibly hard to bottle all these things up on your own, and it's also hard to talk to people. But if you can have a glimmer that you could unload something off on one of your friends or family, that is incredibly important. And also I try, and it's hard, and I am quite a negative person, would you believe? But I try and find the positive things in everything, if I can. The smallest thing, you know, the other day I was out walking the dog, and the sun was shining, and I saw the sun shining through the trees. That was lovely. So one of my friends said to me recently, you have to try and find the positive in everything. And I do try. It is hard, but getting out every day, having a little walk, if you can't go any further than round the block, just go around the block, or see a friend, or, well, if you're within the regulations of COVID. But yeah, it's, and also JAMI is one of the most amazing charities that I think we're very lucky to have in our community. Unfortunately, when I was going through my difficult mental illness, I didn't know about JAMI, and I didn't know that it was also down the road from me. So I wish I had have known that, but I didn't. So yeah, it's as I said, it's not easy, but you just have to take it one day at a time.
Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate your courage and your bravery for being so forthright and open with everybody about your own experiences. And again, you might have gotten so-called lucky in the sense that Ian had the care, but I'm sure it was compounded still by the anxiety of COVID, and then of course the bereavement as well. So you are an example of somebody who knows how to dig deep and seek the right help, which really brings me on to my next question, which I'd like to put to all of you, because actually only a few hours ago, I was speaking to someone who said to me, I'm not going to go on tonight. I can't, because if people see my screen, they will think that I have mental health issues. I just had a quick glimpse through earlier, and I see that, unfortunately, much as I tried, that person didn't join us. But it does raise a big question, and I'm not going to ask about the many of you that have your screens turned off, because your names are still underneath. But it does go to show, here we are, 2021, and whilst we've made so much progress, even in the royal family highlighting it, there seems to be so much stigma still associated with mental health. Do you agree? And if so, what do you believe can be done about it? Jonathan, if I can begin with you.
Well, thanks, Robert. I mean, the answer, of course, is yes and no. Actually, I've been a psychiatrist for 20 years. And if I compare how things are now in terms of stigma and understanding of mental health, it's incomparable to how it was 20 years ago. People are becoming more open to talk about what they go through. Cheryl's spoken very bravely about her own experiences. And I think people aren't judging you, and people, when people speak about their mental health, aren't seeing it now as weakness or, you know, there's something intrinsically wrong with your character. People are understanding this is illness, this is health, and things go wrong with your health. And when they do, the best thing to do is to seek help. I think the language is improving. I think the commonality of conversation is improving. Numbers are going up of people that are using mental health services, but I don't think that particularly represents an increase in mental health issues, although, you know, we always try and understand that maybe it's to do with modern society or something. I think it's because people are more willing to accept help. As I say, I think evenings like this do absolute wonders. I get phone calls from friends, I get phone calls from friends of friends and family, and they speak to me about it. But more often, rather than saying, look, you mustn't tell anybody about this, I'm hearing more and more, it's okay, you know, if you need to discuss it with anyone, don't worry. So I think things are getting better, right? You highlighted the work of the royal family, in particular Prince William, who works with Johnny Benjamin, who I'm sure many of you have heard speak, has done amazing things for that. The portrayal in the media is improving. It's still not perfect by any means, and particularly dramatists like to use mental health as a sort of shorthand in terms of things going wrong, or sort of script shortcuts that I see that annoy me. But if I look at newspaper headlines, I like the language now, whereas 10 years ago, I didn't like the language, you know. So I think things are getting better. There's always more work to be done, but it's what I said at the beginning. I think it's just understanding that mental health is health. It's not really anything separate. It's just another aspect of our overall health. And if we see it in that way, we should be no more ashamed of talking about our depression or anxiety as we would be about talking about a broken leg or, you know, our asthma. It's just, oh yeah, this is what we do. This is what I need for it. This keeps me going. And I think part of the stigma is societal. And part of it, though, is still, it's hard for us to talk about our feelings. It's hard for us to talk about the innermost workings of our mind and what could be going wrong. So I think there'll always be that struggle, which is understandable. But I think better signposting of how to get help. I think, you know, JAMI does a wonderful job of that. The NHS is overworked, but those pathways are relatively clear, and the work keeps being done to make them clearer. I think helps with all of that. So, you know, it's understanding we're depressed as much as we might understand that, you know, we're sort of having a heart attack or an asthma attack is so important. Understanding of psychosis is still, I think, a long way behind depression and anxiety, but I think that's getting somewhere. And again, I think the more we talk about it, the more we can have evenings like this, the more the language that is used becomes normalized. I think the better things will get there.
All right, thank you for that. I mean, Adam, would you actually agree? JAMI, you mentioned had a 170% increase. Is that now more people with anxiety because of the pandemic coming for help? Is it just the enhanced awareness? And indeed, how does JAMI promote itself How do you encourage JAMI to be a vehicle, an avenue for which more people can then choose to access and make use of?
I do agree, Jonathan. I think, you know, the answer is yes and no. I think that the language around mental health, and as I said earlier on, you know, the fact that we've got mental health is there and is being talked about at every level within society, I think that is helping in terms of the stigma being broken down. I think the starting point is we all have mental health. Some people deal with it in different ways, but all of us have mental health, and there's no stigma attached to falling ill. I mean, I didn't feel that when I got COVID, there's a stigma attached to that. God forbid when people have terrible illnesses, there's no physical illness, there's no stigma attached to that. Yet still within certain areas of society, I think mental illness is seen as a weakness. You asked the direct question, what can we do? And I think it's very simple. As Jonathan said, I think we can challenge that stigma. We can help by talking to colleagues, by talking to friends. We can try and correct people if they make negative comments and incorrect comments about mental illness. And I think that there's a responsibility for all of us to do that, in the same way that in other areas of society, people may say that, you know, we've become more politically correct as a society. I think when people talk about mental illness, and as Jonathan alluded to before, that sometimes the language over the last 15, 20 years and the way the shortcuts that the media sometimes take is unhelpful. And we, all of us, have a responsibility to be able to challenge that. In terms of JAMI, of course, it's an interesting double-edged sword, because whilst every time, and I know when we speak, we have a fantastic head of marketing and our fundraising side, and every time she puts out a campaign to talk about the work that we do, what happens is more and more people get in touch. And are there more people out there, or are more people willing to talk about mental health? I suspect that the pandemic has caused more people to be affected in terms of mental illness. I also suspect that there is an element which is more people now, as opposed to a decade ago, are more willing to talk about their mental health. I'm interested, and I know you're here to talk to us, but I'm interested in your perspective, Rabbi, as well, in terms of how it is within the community, because certainly when I'm talking about that, I'm looking at the wider perspective. I think there are certain areas within the Jewish community where, again, perhaps that stigma is more than in other areas of society, perhaps in different types of age groups and in different demographics. So I think that we all have a responsibility to challenge negative stereotype, negative language, and incorrect language around mental health. As far as JAMI is concerned, we will continue to be as open as we can be, certainly as we move forward. And we're looking to, as I said, we're looking at the moment, we're in the middle of a strategic review as to where do we go from here. I'd like to see us having more shop fronts, more cafes like we have in Golders Green. Many of you will have seen on the high street in Mill Hill Broadway. We've got a headroom building there. We want to look and see how we can open that up so that really it becomes very easy to engage, very easy to talk in a safe space about mental illness. But I echo everything Jonathan says, and again, just to reiterate, the fact that there's over 100 people on a call tonight here in the community talking about it is a really good start.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm intrigued by what you say, because it is so true that in different demographics, there is a whole, within Judaism, there is a whole different approach to mental health. It's fair to say that I think within mainstream Anglo Jewry, i.e. United Synagogue, et cetera, people are more conscientious, and I'm sure probably make up vast majority of clientele. And I suppose even within other, maybe call it more closeted communities, they probably don't necessarily feel as comfortable reaching out to an organization per se, maybe more inclined to reach out to a personal psychiatrist to deal with it. But then again, there are all kinds of social stigmas that still linger. And that brings me to you, Cheryl, because I mean, it begs the question, what gave you the courage to speak out? What enabled you, unlike so many others, to actually, it's one thing to pursue the help, to disassociate from the stigma in regards to pursuing help, but it's an altogether and a whole other level to be able to have the courage to speak about it publicly. And indeed, from your own experience, how might you encourage others to do the same?
Well, interestingly, 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when I was at my worst point, I did find it very hard to talk about. In fact, I hope my siblings, if they're listening, won't mind me saying that they found it quite difficult to understand how I was feeling. And also Ian, my husband, my kids were young at the time, and he didn't seem to sort of grasp the fact. And also I didn't know what was happening to me. It was, although I'd suffered panic attacks in the past, this was something different. This was much more severe than it was in my early teens and early 20s, and certainly when I was younger. So when I was at my worst time, I had a call one evening from a friend of mine who said, "You've got to go and see a private doctor," which Ian took me to see. And then I saw a psychiatrist and followed on from some talking therapy. And then over the years, when I had the therapy and had gone on to antidepressants, I was very open to speaking to people about it. I'm one of those people who I'm a talker. Sometimes people can't shut me up. So I do like to share things, sometimes to my detriment, and my dear husband will tell me that sometimes I talk too much or talk for the sake of talking, but I do like to share things. I don't like to keep things on my chest. I'd like to think that what you see is what you get with me. I'm very, open and very like to talk about things. So I just began to talk about my journey, and it was only when I attended a Johnny Benjamin talk at Shaw one evening a few years ago that I, in the nicest possible way, got a bit anxious and a bit upset about some of the questions that were being asked about how you explain mental health to children and the stigma around mental health. So me being me, put my hands up at the end and was quietly shushed by somebody who didn't want me to ask questions. But I did, and I explained that I suffer from mental health issues, and my children had witnessed me having a very bad panic attack and a small breakdown. And I explained that you can't sugarcoat things. You have to be honest. You have to speak to your children, and it's a real thing. It needs to be spoken about, and there shouldn't be a stigma attached. As Jonathan Adams said, there's less of a stigma around mental health. Anyway, from that evening, Kelly Lee at Shaw asked me if I'd like to become the ambassador for JAMI for Mental Health Shaw. Absolutely, I'll do anything I can. I'm passionate about getting the words out there that it's important to talk. And then part of the mental health Shabbat, mental health awareness Shabbat, was asked if I could do a 10 talk, which we did a few years ago. I didn't think anything of it until the night before, and I panicked and I thought, goodness, what am I going to say? I don't really know what to do. And then I told my story that Shabbos morning with lots of people listening. I thought, I was very nervous, of course, not nervous about the fact that I was sharing my story, nervous about the fact that I had to stand up in front of all these people. And that led on to people from years ago that I hadn't spoken to ask me questions and say, oh, you've helped me, or can I speak to you, or can we go for coffee? And it's just, I realised then that people don't talk about it enough, don't talk about how they're feeling. As Adam and Jonathan said, if you've got a broken leg, you can see it. But if you've got something that's troubling you in your head, you don't really want to talk about it and you're too frightened. But there is no stigma attached to it. And people want to share experiences. And when I did speak to my friends eventually about the way I was feeling and said to them, I've had to go on antidepressants, a good majority of my friends also are on antidepressants, but nobody ever knew about it. So that's how I started talking about it. I will talk till I'm blue in the face about it because I find it very important. And I try and help people. And if I can, I haven't got the answers, I just draw on my own experiences. I also did the mental health first aid course at JAMI, which was incredible. So as I said, again, I'm no professional. I just draw on my own experiences, and I help, and I'll talk to anyone who wants to talk to me.
Well, you know what they say, Cheryl, anything that is mentionable can be manageable. And when we talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming and less upsetting. So let's talk about children, because like adults, a child's mental health is just as important as their physical health and deserves the same quality of support. Now, they will certainly have been impacted as well in probably ways that we might not necessarily recognize. They have minimal access to friends. They're in school online for so much of the last 11 months. They're cooped up in their homes. I wonder to myself, and I have a 12-year-old, is this a temporary glitch? Will they bounce back once we're back to normal? Adam, does JAMI offer services for children or teens as well?
So we at the moment work with Norwood, with Camp Simcha, who offer specifically for children, and we do from kind of teens upwards, and certainly with students. I think you're right. I mean, Jonathan will, I'm sure, give you a much more clinical, correct response in terms of will they bounce back. I think children are very resilient, and I think a lot will, but I think we cannot underestimate the impact that this has had. And, you know, when I look at it, whatever my age is, this year perhaps isn't going to look much different in real terms to last year and perhaps to next year. But if you're 13, 14, 15, if you are about to start your A-levels, or we're about to start university, these are key years. And this has really ripped through. And of course, sitting in, and I'm sitting here in my son's bedroom, where he spends from 8 in the morning till 3, I think, online working through online school, I think. And it's difficult. It's difficult because they don't have that interaction. They don't have that social interaction that school brings. And it's rare, perhaps, for some people to hear children saying they're looking forward to going back to school. But I think they are. But I do think, I think the schools, and certainly the schools where my children have been doing a very good job. And I do think that children are resilient as a whole. I think there is a significant divide. I think some people, certainly in different socioeconomic circles, will have found it far more difficult. And I think that as a society, again, we're going to have to think, what does 2022, 2023 look like? Because this is something which will impact going forward. So we, as far as JAMI are concerned, are very much hoping that we will be working with anybody who can and help you doing that. One of the first things we did, and in fact it was kind of lost in the beginning of the lockdown, but in April last year, we launched Couth, which was as an online interactive counselling service aimed at more at students, but aimed at sort of 16 plus, in order to provide something so that they were able to literally from their bedroom, from a computer, from a tablet, from a telephone, be able to access help and support. So that is part of what we've done. We've also worked with schools, unfortunately, with dealing with the aftermath of suicide, and we've worked with other organisations where that's happened in order to be able to provide support to schools and school children, because sadly, as we've heard and will have heard in the community over time, people taking their own life, young people, happens, and again, we want to try and be there to help and support. So I think that in terms of what we do, I think we have to realise what an impact it does have on children, and where we can again engage, talk, go out for walks, make sure they're exercising, make sure they're eating properly, and make sure they can, where possible, connect with friends and family, and really try and boost and support their mental health, because I do think it'll have a big impact.
Okay, and Cheryl, I know you work with especially younger children, and of course they will have had school as normal in nurseries and kindergartens. But even for them, there are plenty of surely abnormal situations, because all of a sudden, why can't we see grandma? Why can't I give grandpa a hug? And indeed, what of the many who sadly will have lost a grandparent in the midst of all this? Do you just very briefly, do you see any of this in your experience as the deputy head of your kindergarten?
I do actually, and it's quite incredible how the children have picked up on it. I work with aged children that are 2 and upwards, and certainly the older children. In fact, one of the staff was telling me the other day that one of the kids was trying to hug another kid, and they said, "Have you got corona? Because you've got to be careful." So I think it does have an impact on their mental health. They are very aware of it. Obviously, their mums and dads are talking to them about it. We try not to make such an issue of it at nursery, but they do. A couple of them have been a bit withdrawn, but nothing terrible. I think, as you said before, children are very resilient and take these things on the chin. And a few of them have lost grandparents or had parents that have had COVID, and they're very adaptable. They're very adaptable. That, you know, one day they can say one thing and the next day talk about something completely different, or in the same sentence sometimes. So yeah, it has affected some of them, but I think nowadays in 2021, I'd like to think even these young children would get some help if they're suffering from if they're being withdrawn or anything like that. They would definitely get some help, certainly from the teachers and the senior staff. Yeah.
So that brings us to you, Jonathan, for the professional opinion. If you can elaborate a little bit about how you might see children being affected by what is essentially for them an unprecedented experience, and whether in fact they will bounce.
Sure. I think Adam makes a very good distinction between younger children and sort of early and late teens. For younger children, the basic is always to have at least one unconditionally loving relationship, a parental relationship. And if they've got that, everything else is kind of okay, you know, in general. You know, what does that mean? It means they've got at least one person that they know they feel safe with, they can rely on, that they trust implicitly. There's no even thought that this person will abandon them or mistreat them. In an ideal world, of course, there's much more than that. There's at least 2 parents, there's grandparents and aunts and uncles, and these big extended sort of networks that children feel they're at the center of. And of course they are in their world. And in a sense, COVID hasn't changed that hugely. The networks got smaller, but if they have people around them that are safe and giving, then they're going to be okay. I think it's just part of their experience that, you know, it's all they know. And they adapt quickly. And as for resilience, you know, part of the problem of bouncing back from trauma is all the history and all the baggage that we build up over our lives that make things very difficult to change. I think if families get affected, if they lose parents or loved ones, I think, you know, they may be confronted with bereavement, which they otherwise wouldn't necessarily have to confront. So I think that can be an issue. But again, I think there's more of that from COVID, but it's not necessarily something new from COVID. I think where I'm more worried is that older generation, that sort of teens, the people who are missing out on very big milestones in their lives, their exams, going on Israel tour, these big opportunities to socialize at such a vulnerable and developing age. And I think that combines with what's one of the most unprecedented changes in communication technology the world's ever seen. You know, the advent of the internet in all its forms and social media is something we just don't know about. We have to learn from them. I heard somebody recently describe that we are digital immigrants. You know, my generation and older, we remember the world without it, and we've come into it and we're learning about it. But our children are natives to this digital world, so they understand it better. So we're playing catch up. And what we don't yet understand is how it's affecting their mental health, both positively and negatively. And when you combine that with COVID, so not just this easier way to communicate without leaving your bedroom, which means that you can take an easier route to sort of manage anxieties and social anxieties that otherwise you'd sort of be forced to confront and overcome and manage and learn actually how to manage. You've got both that digital route and an absence of real life communication. And I think we're going to be seeing the effects of that in the future. What it is yet, I don't know, but I think it's something we have to be mindful of. you know, in general, when we talk about the internet, essentially we have to be careful. It's a great access, it's a great communication, but we wouldn't come into a house and leave all the doors and windows open with a big welcome sign to whoever. You know, we unfortunately don't live in a society that's worth doing. And in the internet, somehow we have to be very careful to not shut it down, to always be welcoming, to use it and understand it, but to also have appropriate safeguards. And I think that combination of everything social and external really being shut down, and this huge online world, which our generation is struggling to come to terms with and what it really means. I think that's something we have to be so careful about. But again, you know, if we reduce stigma, if we understand communication has to be positive in every way that it can be, to understand when people are in situations they don't know how to handle and how to offer help and support for that, then I think, you know, we'll probably be okay. But trying to get a 16-year-old to tell you things aren't okay, and understanding they're not okay, and worrying about overreacting and underreacting is really a parental challenge that as a father of 3 preteens, I'm slightly anxious about myself, if I'm honest with you. But you know, this is where we are, so we can't reject it. We have to embrace it and understand it. But you know, as I say, I think with the younger children, if we can be there as good parents for them, they'll be fine through this. I honestly believe so. You know, that's not 100% guarantee promise, but actually I think it'll be okay. Those teenagers who are losing things and who are having to adapt incredibly rapidly to an incredibly rapidly changing world, you know, there I can see, you know, problems if we're not very careful and don't take it very seriously, and be incredibly careful not to invalidate what they're experiencing or what they're feeling, because I think that's a big deal. You have to understand they've got their point of view, and even if we can't understand it, it doesn't make it any less valid.
You remind me actually of when I was doing my Rosh Hashanah walkabout with the shofar and came to a particular neighborhood and saw one kid suddenly doing like this. And I thought right away, I saw my daughter in that. I said, oh my gosh, you've got TikTok. And her dad said, yes, it's known as the TikTok Twitch. There you go. So final point. There was a great 18th century sage known as Rabbi Aaron of Karlin. He passed away actually very young, but in his short 36 years of life, he was incredibly impactful. One of his famous sayings is, depression is not a sin, but what depression can lead to, even the worst of sins cannot lead to. And I think in our context, he was way ahead of his time. I would interpret what he's saying as meaning, if you're struggling, abolish the guilt and the shame. There is no iniquity in mental health. Depression is not a sin. But what it can lead to, even though the worst of sins cannot lead to, meaning how wrong it would be if you don't choose to deal with it. There's an absolute mandate to care for your mind as much as your body and soul. So finally, and ever so briefly, if I may, my illustrious panel, what words do you have for our audience to encourage to look after their mental health? And what tips, maybe even just to give them to cope through these next several weeks? Cheryl, I'll begin with you.
Thank you. I would say, and I always say, it's good to talk. Talk to anyone. Talk to anyone you can. Share things with your friends if you can. I just think that talk, sometimes it's very difficult to talk, but if you can find it within yourself to open up to somebody, even if it's somebody that is completely impartial and doesn't know anything about you and how you're feeling, with friends or colleagues, to me.
Jonathan?
Look, health is health. So in the same way you think about your physical health, you know, you watch what you eat, you try and exercise, think about your mental health. You know, what do you enjoy? If you can't do that at the moment, what else is there? You know, be adaptable, think of it like a puzzle. If I can't do this, but I want to get to that end, what new thing can I do? By the way, the brain likes new things. You know, a way of staying off midlife crisis is to do simple new things, try something new in a restaurant, take a new route to work. You know, amazingly, the brain loves that kind of novelty in simple terms. So don't be afraid to try new things. Don't be afraid to think about your mental health as a puzzle that needs to be solved. You know, if I'm not feeling this, if I can't do the things I like, let's look at it intelligently. Let's find another route. Let's find other things we can do. Remember the good things. You know, there's some simple positive thought exercise at the end of every day. Just spend 2 minutes thinking about something good you saw, something you did, something that made you laugh, something you enjoyed, something you admired. It reinforces those pathways in the brain. It makes you see the good things better, and it makes you relive them. It makes you more open to joyful things. Do things for other people. You know, there was interesting studies that if you want happiness and you buy something, you get a big spike of happiness that goes down very quickly. If you do an experience, you go on holiday or away or go somewhere new, you get a nice rounded bump of happiness. When you do things for other people, you get an exponential growth of happiness. You get a return on your investment. That's something to think about. But more than that, like your health, you know, you try and keep healthy by eating well, by exercising, by doing the right things. But you also recognize when actually something's wrong and I need to go and help. I need to get help. You know, I can't manage this myself. So be open to the idea of, you know, I'm doing what I can, but right now I need something else. It's not a failure that, you know, it's not a sign you're not jogging enough if you become depressed or anxious. It's just a sign you're not very well. So do what you can to maintain your health, your mental health as you would your other health, but also recognize when, you know what, now I need something else. Now I need some help.
Okay, beautiful. Adam?
You know, I'm not sure I can add anything better than what Cheryl and Jonathan have said. I would absolutely endorse all of that. We talk, to reach out. What I will say is if anybody is watching tonight or you know anybody and you reach out, there is help there. JAMI is there to help. And I would encourage you to please use our services if you need them, to refer people to us. I talked briefly earlier about Kooth, which is there, KOOTH, which is there for young people. We've also, during the pandemic, brought into a service called Quell, which is effectively the same. It's an online service, counselling service, where you can speak to people, but it's aimed at adults. And again, I would encourage people, please do reach out if you need help, recognising that you need that help, recognising that you need that support. It is part of the way there. There is help out there. So I'd agree with what Jonathan and Cheryl says. Please talk to each other, reach out to friends, connect with others, go out, walk outside, get some fresh air, and just try and do whatever you can to embrace what is this awful time we're living in, but in any way that you can to try and improve and boost your mental health. And if I may, Rabbi, you'll forgive me. We do, as you mentioned before, have on Thursday night, it's our fundraiser, and I'm not here to fundraise at all, but it's going to be it's an hour content, which is going to tell you a lot more about JAMI, about some of our service users. We've got some fantastic videos and films talking about the ways in which you can engage and things that JAMI do. And if anybody is interested, you can either go via our website, or we've called it Utopia, as in what is our post-COVID utopia? What is it that we're looking at, where we're trying to go? And if you go to myutopia.org, you'll be able to see all the details. And I'd again encourage people, if you want to find out a bit more about JAMI, to please join us on Thursday night. And please all take care of yourselves. That would really be my message.
Thank you so much. I do want to allow a few moments for audience questions if there are any, but before doing so, I've been asked to mention, first of all, that Johnny Benjamin is going to be talking to teenagers on Sunday. And also there is the Wellbeing Walk on Sunday that Project Impact is organizing with JAMI for teenagers. All that information is available on the Shull website. So I would encourage you, if you have teenagers, go onto the Shull website and encourage your children, your teenagers, to participate. If we can take maybe just a few moments, I know the hour is a bit late, but we'll just take a few moments. I do have to thank my daughter Esty, who as always is sitting here silently and inconspicuously on the side, managing all the technology. So she'll help me if you do raise your hand to unmute you and take a question that you might have or a comment that you might make, only to urge you please to keep it as brief as possible. And you see, we're back to the stigma. If I ask a question, people might think I have a problem. No, I'm just being a little facetious there. Well, do we have one?
I think Kelly Lee.
Kelly Lee, hold on, let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, hello everyone. Thank you very much, Adam, Cheryl and John. Appreciate you coming online tonight. Just a question, I just wanted to think your thoughts on, do you think, I was one of the people that was helped to make the very difficult decision about closing schools. And I just wondered what you think the correlation is between, not just talking about Mill Hill, the correlation is between something like schools or churches closing and people's mental health. And
Oh, I can tell you that.
Well, okay, but I've heard your point of view. I want their point of view.
You know, I mean, if I can answer, I think it's huge. I think one of the things about COVID and why it's affected people's mental health is that, you know, as Jews, whether you buy into it or not, we have a pretty good set of guidelines. We know what happens and we've got benchmarks and points. Sadly, we know what happens when somebody passes on. We have a shiva, we have shloshim, we have a year, we have time to go to shul. We know what happens when people take ill. We know what to do. The community rallies round. We know in good times when people have babies and the shul comes round and brings a chicken or a challah. We've got all these benchmarks. And then suddenly in March, we had lockdown and nobody knew what to do. Nobody had that benchmark. And I think that, you know, as the rabbi said, not going to shul, not having that community point, I think has had a massive impact. But I think we have to continue. And I, as the rabbi said earlier, I'm just hopefully at the end of 3 or 4 weeks of being really quite ill with COVID. And I would absolutely encourage anybody, you know, stay at home, don't try and be clever, don't go to shul, don't go out where you're not, and just look after yourself. But I think it does have a massive impact, and I'm sure we're all looking forward to when we can get back to shul. I'll say, please God, it will be Yontif, but not perhaps commit to which Yontif that will be.
Or what year?
For the record, Kelly, forgive me, I'm going to just tell you that there are 2 blind studies that were done in 2 universities in America a number of years ago that categorically proved how prayer was directly correlated with people's, that was particularly heart patients, physical well-being, and let alone therefore mental well-being. But sorry, over to Jonathan.
No, absolutely. Look, COVID has bombed out the center of a lot of people's life and routines. You know, not just through the losses, but through the changes in everything that seems normal. And shul, of course, for many of us is a big part of that. And you know, the community, Jewish activities in general, but also amongst other communities, of course, as well. I think it's that idea that I said at the beginning, that if we have a viewpoint that this will be over soon, so we just bunker down and don't do anything differently, then, you know, we'll get past this. And often for most problems, that actually works just fine. But once we understand that this is a longer problem and a bigger problem, it's about adaptation. And, you know, I praise the shul for what it's doing in terms of its talks, in terms of its outreach programs. You know, if I think back on Hanukkah and the rabbi coming around and lighting the Hanukkah and everything like that and blowing the shofar on the Yom Tovim, you know, I think this is adaptation and this helps with mental health. And it's about, okay, so we can't go to shul, so how can we make the shul come to us? And I think that's such an important thing, and it's such an important adaptation. I think it's a great metaphor for everything we need to do right now until there is a semblance of normality or what we understand as our old normality back again. But, you know, I think we can't just gloss over the fact that it's done. We can't sort of say, well, let's wait it out. I think we've got to do the changes, and the changes that the shul have done, I think, have been fantastic.
If I may, Rabbi, sorry to interrupt. I think that ill mental health feeds on this pandemic, and it certainly helped me knowing that we've got all the things accessible to us from shul, all the sometimes light-hearted talks that we've had. I think that, you know, I'll put my hands up. I'm sure most of you know I'm not a regular shul goer, but I like to be involved in shul activities, and I think certainly for Ian, actually, who is likes to attend shul every Shabbat, it's been hard for him not getting back into that routine. But I think to connect with your friends from shul, and certainly over the Zoom calls, which I think have been incredible over lockdown from what the shul have prepared, is been inspiring and so helpful for people to connect.
And if that does wonders for all of your mental well-being, imagine Shoal is my lifeline, my blood. It's my day-to-day 24/7. So this was my therapy. This was my way of coping by means of digging deep and determining how to be more creative and indeed bringing the Shoal out to as many of you as possible. I see there's a question over here from Trisha Kay, so we're going to unmute her.
Can I speak?
Go ahead.
Yes. Why don't you have like a workshop, like a Alcoholics Anonymous and Gamblers Anonymous, so that people who don't necessarily want to get a direct referral can go to like a drop-in centre and take that first step to offloading? Because it's very hard to go to your doctor and actually make that first move. Would it not be possible for someone like JAMI or someone like that to have sort of drop-in centres where people can make that first big step?
So I actually, someone messaged me in the middle of all of this to tell me that there are organizations that actually work completely below the radar. You can't even share the fact that you work for that particular organization. Now, some argue that might only add to the stigma, but as per what you're saying, it's a worthy sacrifice for the good that they do. So if people are looking for that, they need only but ask and they'll be able to find it.
Why couldn't JAMI do that though? Just have a sort of like AA or Gamblers.
Yeah. I mean, we do. I mean, we have the cafe, which has a headroom cafe. And again, I'd ask you, please check the website and have a look at what's there. Has a whole program. It is a drop-in. It is an anonymous drop-in. We don't take register names. It's there for everybody.
It's not about your name, but Cheryl's right. Sometimes you just want to talk and you don't want to talk to your friends. You don't want to talk to your family.
Absolutely.
But quite easily sit around with other like-minded people and just offload. And once you've made that first move,
yeah,
I think it would be.
I mean, as far as JAMI, we have the cafe. We have 4 hubs where across London. Obviously, at the moment, they're not meeting in person, but there is an online program,
Right.
and it's exactly that. And it's like this. Obviously, not so many
Yes.
people, but in that way where you can offload. And also Couth and Quell. Again, it's a different type. It's online, but it is anonymous and people can access. So please do, for you or for friends or whoever it is. But please check out, it's jamiuk.org, our website, and have a look, because there is a lot going on, and you know, we are there. That's exactly what we're there to do and to try and help facilitate. And we have different, for example, that there's a fathers group who meet. There's a group who meets of parents of young people. There's a carers group. There's all different types of groups of people who will meet, and hopefully we're there to provide support for everybody. We've got trained counsellors, and our services are free. There's a, you know, we're
Just taking that first step.
Please do, and it's really important to take that first
Thank
step.
you.
If I may, sorry, just in reference to Trisha's question, I think don't be afraid to ask for help. I mean, when I was quite bad, the first thing I did was get taken to my GP surgery, who then started the ball rolling. But I think it's that initial reaching out to someone and say, please, I can't do, you know, I'm struggling, I need help, whether you call Samaritans or whether you call any kind of helpline. It's just that initial, you know, hand out, please help me, please give me some support. There's no shame in that, and I urge people to do that. It's hard, but I urge you to do that if you're suffering, because you never suffer alone. There's always somebody that can help you.
Somebody actually just messaged me to say that he's setting up something called the Listening Cafe, which also will facilitate the coming together of people, strangers, literally ready to listen and to talk. Well, the hour is late, and I want to just reiterate again, the program's available for the youth, the teenagers on Sunday. It's actually not on the Shoal page, but it's actually on the Shoal Facebook page. And I'm going to finish by thanking all of my panel very, very much. Remember, everybody, mental health it's not a destination, it's a process. It's about how you drive, not where you're going. So be strong. Things will get better. It may be stormy now, but it never rains forever. Thank you very, very much, Jonathan, Adam, and Cheryl, for sharing with us, for inspiring us, for giving us tools and really making a difference in a very real and tangible way. I really, really, truly, on behalf of the entire community and everyone else gathered over here, express my deep felt gratitude to you for making the time available to all of us tonight. And I wish you all a good night.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Be well, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.